Hi, everyone. Welcome to another session of Women in Caribbean Aquaculture Leadership Summit. This is there's only one day left of this summit, so we're very excited. From March 10th to March 22nd, we have had 10 sessions now. And before I introduce our guest speaker today, I'm going to mention a couple of housekeeping rules, well, a few. So this could be a place for networking. So if you're here, we encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat, share your name, your role, what bring you here, your email, or whatever you'd like. This session is being recorded, so by participating, you consent to be recorded. The content, the document and the contents of the session are the intellectual property of the speakers, and we'll have a dedicated Q&A session at the end. But if you have any questions in the meantime, make sure you can write them in the chat. And at the Q&A session, if you'd like to raise your hand and turn on your camera or your mic, then you're also welcome to do that. It seems like I put the wrong slide over here. But our host today is Dr. Julianne Russo. Let me see if this next slide. No. Okay, so this was different. So the host today's one is Dr. Julie Ann Russo, CEO and founder of the Caribbean Aquaculture Education and Innovation Hub. And me, Mariana Flores, I work for Hatch Blue for a business support program called Gemini. Um, Words about the Caribbean Aquaculture Education and Innovation Hub. Well, as you may know, this is a groundbreaking project that brings together science, technology, business, entrepreneurship, and policy to address the need for the improvement of aquaculture in the Caribbean. And just a few words on Women in Ocean Food Innovation Studio. Well, this is, as I said, a business support program for women in aquaculture and blue economy. Our focus is Latin America, and we welcome women in aquaculture and other areas of the blue economy for a free program, free of equity, to be in La Paz, Mexico for 2 weeks and to receive world class mentorship to advance their businesses. And of course, just a reminder you of the purpose of the summit is that we aim to provide visibility to women aquaculture scientists and entrepreneurs, amplify their voices, break barriers, and create pathways into leadership for women. That is why we have such a diverse panel and guest speaker array. And oh, yes, as I thought, I chose the wrong presentation. I'm so sorry, but just let me present the correct one. You're seeing the correct one right now, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, sorry for that. But this also is something that happens in live TV, so no worries. Okay, so I'm very happy to present our guest speaker for today, Rosalind Baitel, and she'll be presenting her work in Panama in aquaculture. And I'm gonna present her reading her bio, and then I will introduce Jimena Shaw, which also be in this session. So Rosalind originally is from New Orleans, Louisiana, and she graduated from Louisiana State University in biology in 1983. In 85, she moved to Panama to teach secondary science in the U.S. Department of Defense schools. Along the way, she developed a love and appreciation for sea cucumbers, and in 2018, she helped form PanaSea Aquaculture on the Caribbean coast of Panama. PanaSea now serves as an aquaculture hub in the area, raising and restoring sea cucumbers, planting mangroves and seagrass beds, and helping with coral restoration in the area of Linton Bay, Panama. So, Rosalind, welcome. But before that, I will pass the mic to Jimena. How are you, Jimena? Hi.
Hi everyone, welcome. I'm so happy to be here. And yeah, just to introduce myself, I'm from Panama. I am a marine biologist. I finished my degree in 2023. And now I'm currently in Perth, Western Australia, doing a master's in science communication. I won't give everything away, but yeah, wait till the presentation.
Okay,
Mariana.
so thank you so much, Jimena, Rosalind. So I will stop sharing my screen and will welcome you. Pass the mic, as I said, and the stage is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to start sharing my screen now. Great. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can.
Well, welcome everyone to our session. In this session, we are talking from the representatives of Panama, of women in the Caribbean aquaculture. So that's Rosalind Baitel, and I am kind of new. I just became an intern a couple of months ago. So yeah, let's get started. So yeah, as I said, we are Jimena Shaw and Rosalind Baitel. And yeah, my name, as I said already, is Jimena Shaw. I am from Panama, very proudly. In 2023, I completed my degree in marine biology in the International Maritime University of Panama. And for us, we have to do a thesis project to be able to get our degree. So it took me quite a bit, about 2 years to do my research project, thesis and dissertation. Then I worked for a little bit in the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute and decided to move to Australia to pursue my master of Science Communication at the University of Western Australia. Now, where it all began, my interest for marine science began when I was pretty little. I used to go to the beach with my parents all the time, and I used to see like the horizon of the ocean, and I was like, my dad and I would compete and race, see who gets to the furthest. And for me, the ocean was always like my second place. I was always very happy to be there, very interested what was below me in the water. So when coming into making a decision of what I was going to study, I had no thought. It was definitely marine biology, even though my professors at school, some of my family members were like, "Oh, are you going to make money out of that?" Money didn't matter to me. I just wanted to do what my passion was. So before I started university, I was able to do a couple of internships at INDICASAT, AIP, which is a research institute here in Panama. They don't focus on marine biology or marine science, but I did get to explore the life of a scientist and how research is done. And thankfully, they published a little article of that I written, and that's the QR code for. So yeah, it was the history of how I got into marine science and interest in marine biology. Then during my last school year, I was able to do an internship at Punta Culebra, which is the visitor center for the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute in Panama. And that was really interesting because before going into study marine science, I got to talk to people about it, see what they were interested in. And I think this is what brought me a little bit to wanting to study science communication later in the future. So when I started doing university, my marine biology degree, I realized that I had to do a thesis by the end of it. So from the start of my degree, I was already looking at what I was going to do for a thesis. So while studying, I worked at different laboratories for the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute. to try different disciplines and yeah, kind of get the feel of different disciplines to see what I would like more. So I worked at a fish laboratory, and in this fish laboratory, the head of the lab was Dr. Ross Robertson, and he helped make these two guides to fish in the East Pacific and the Caribbean. So this is kind of a platform where you can look for fish, and the platform will give you information on their eating habitat, like pictures of how they are when they're juvenile, when they're adults. So it's kind of like an identification guide. So I helped to develop that. But then I found the ODEA lab, and this is historical ecology and paleobiology laboratory. So they focused on marine fossils, and I kind of fell in love with this, and this is the team of the lab. And we would go on field trips to Colón, which is a province of Panama, where we can find lots of fossils and just look for fossil. We were fossil hunting, and I love the kind of feel you get actually in the field, getting all these treasures that for me were like a little piece of for time traveling, because they take us back to where the fossil was fossilized or where the animal sadly died. But it gives us so much information, which I'll get more into here with my thesis. So my thesis was, the name was Analysis of the Fossil Record of Fish, of reef fish from Saboga Island in Panama, in the Pacific. It's a Pacific island in Panama. And what I did here, I focused on fish otoliths, which are these small stones that fish have in their inner ear. And what I did with them is I took the fossils we found, the otoliths, and I gave them a taphonomic score to see how well preserved they were and see if they could be used for further research. Now, the fun part, the methodology. I get to go, well, my team got to go into the island, into the reef in the island in the Pacific. We extract cores, which is how we get the samples, and I'll play a video of that in a little bit. Then we cut the cores. We got able to take the otoliths out, and with that, a couple of coral sections to be able to chronologically date the whole core. So that's how we know that the core was from, in my case, 7,000 years ago until today. So it's kind of like a timeline of the history of this specific island. And yeah, so we wash the sediments, get all the otoliths out, pick them in the microscope. As you can see in this picture here, yeah, there are lots of things that we can find in this sample. We can find sea urchin spines, we can find shark tentacles, we can find sponge spicules. So it was really interesting to see all of this develop. And why it's not letting me? Oh, yeah. So this is how we get the samples out. So the core, we have a 6-meter long aluminum tube, which we hammer into the seabed. Usually it's like a small sand patch in the coral reef, so we don't damage the corals. We seal it so it creates kind of suction, so the sample doesn't go all out when we take it out. And we pull with help of both human power. This was real an experience. And yeah, that's how we get the sample. Now, to be able to do all this, I had to write so many grants. I can't remember the number. And even in Spanish, in English, but yeah, I got to secure a couple of grants, and these are the ones listed here. And I really like writing grants because it's a way to share what we're doing and yeah, ask for funds so we can complete the purpose of our research. So, and actually talk to people who kind of know what the field, at least technical terms, scientific terms, which general publics will know. Courses. So during my career, I've been very thankful to be part of different courses. So I did a tropical biology course in Bocas del Toro, in which a group of students from the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay came to Panama, and yeah, we were all undergraduate students learning together about reef ecology, rainforest ecology, and it was really interesting to kind of experience this with people from another country, but we're kind of studying the same. Then when during the pandemic, this is the second course, the plankton course, I had an oceanography class, and the professor was kind of the head of the laboratory in Coiba, which is an island in Panama that you can only stay in Coiba if you're doing research. And I got one of the spots for that course. So that was really cool talking to, being taught by plankton experts in this really pristine place. Now to my favorite part, conferences. I've been in conferences both in Panama in the Our Oceans Conference in 2023, where I was part of the Youth Summit. And that was really interesting because I also got to talk to people doing marine science from different part of the world and getting them all together in a room, trying to come up with solutions and talking about the ocean was amazing. I also got to meet one of my, how you call that? One of the persons you really, really look up to in marine science, Dr. Sylvia Earle in this conference. And last year I got to attend the Australian Science Communicators Conference here in Perth. Last year, yeah. Now, I've been able to share my science, among academia. When I presented my poster at Smithsonian's poster conference, and also when I did my dissertation for my thesis, and that was really interesting because I got to show what I've done for about 2-3 years in my career. But to me, what really filled my heart was sharing it with a wider audience, sharing it with kids, sharing it with my grandparents. So yeah, there's a big range of age with the people who I talked about, not only my science, but the science that was being done by the lab I used to work with, the historical ecology one. So I had talks with kids about how the formation of Panama affected the ocean and the marine animals in that ocean. I talked to kids about the Martina book, which is actually a book written by Dr. Aaron O'Day, the head of this laboratory, where he encourages kids to see themselves as scientists and ask questions. And yeah, that was really cool because kids really, after that, we had activities where they could find fossils and they really felt like they were part of something, and they had that twinkle in their eyes. I also shared the science the lab was doing with my grandparents, and it was really special to me because my grandparent right here, he used to live in Colón, where we find most of the fossils some of the fossils for the lab, and this is where we found megalodon tooth, and he had no idea that megalodon sharks were living in his backyard like 2-3 million years ago. So connected that information with him, it was really amazing. And this was during the pandemic, and I took one of the samples, a megalodon tooth from the lab, and took it to them, and they were like, wow, I can't believe I lived there for so many years and I didn't know this. Now on to science communication. I went into science communication because I wanted to share science. What I didn't realize is that sometimes when we want to share our research, we're given just facts, kind of shouting facts to people, and there's no exchange there, and that doesn't work because it's kind of like the other person doesn't get to take it in. You're just receiving, 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 and that's it. That's why in science communication we're trying to move to two-way communication where we take input from our public and try to take that in and explain our science or our research with that in mind. So is this theory, the social constructivism theory, that comes from social education, and it's basically, the metaphor is like you have this house. Everyone has this house that is constantly being remodeled, and by getting new information and by your life experience, by your family history, you have these ideas in your head. And what we want to do with our research and our science is make people make meaning of this science and why is it important, and in that way they will take it in. And it's not like, oh, this, you may not know about this fish, for example, but no, let's explain what it is, explain the importance, explain what it does, so they can find something to make meaning out of that and incorporate it into their house in renovation, into their brains. Another thing we get taught really early in science communication is to make science communication engagement, we have to have a clear purpose, audience, and message. That's how communication is going to be more engagement, because we know who we're talking to. We know our key message, what we want them to take away from this. And with all that, my group of master students that I'm in, we decided to create a science communication podcast and website. It's called the SciComm Collective. You can scan the QR code here in the corner to get to know more about it. But yeah, this is a student-led podcast where we wanted to amplify voices of students, of professionals from all over the world. We have people from India, China, from Panama, from Australia. And of course, if you want to come on the podcast, please let me know. My details are in the end. But yeah, here we're trying to bridge the gap between science and the public, but through engaging communication and trying to get key messages out to people. And yeah, it's been a great path for me. And now I pass it on to Ross.
Thank you, Jimena. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I'm very excited for your next steps. Thank you for all of your help with this presentation and for sharing with us about your science communication studies. As a former high school teacher myself, I feel that science communication is super important because when we discover something, we do need to share it with the world. So welcome everybody. I'm Rosalind Baitel. As Julie said in the beginning, I'm a graduate of Louisiana State University. I have a degree in general biology and a certification in secondary science education. That's what took me to Panama in 1985. I came to Panama to teach secondary science for the Department of Defense schools and met a Panamanian and stayed because I got married along the way, had 2 children. My job actually ended in 1999 with the closing of the military bases. Next slide. But along the way, so my husband has coastal beach property on the Caribbean in Cologne. So along the way, going there every weekend and holidays and getting in the water with my snorkel and seeing all the marine life, the reefs, the animals, plant life in the bay. along the way, we really made a passion to do some community development projects in our area, which would bring employment to the local people. It would also give jobs, give ecology lessons as well. So today I'm very proud to say that although I am going to focus on PanaSea and sea cucumbers, we have some other very cool projects going on in our area as well. So I used to see very healthy populations of sea cucumbers. Then I went on a scientific trip to the Galapagos in 1999, and I learned from the professors how endangered sea cucumbers are, how they've been fished out of the waters, how they're so prized in Asia, and how there's a worldwide ban basically on being able to do anything with sea cucumbers because they're in such short supply and they're so critical to the oceans. Next slide. So I've been talking about sea cucumbers to anybody who would listen. We do have some other aquaculture programs in our area, one of which is called Open Blue. And actually talking to the Vargas gal before we went live, she was familiar with an aquaculture project in Baja, Mexico. And those people have visited us as well. So we are part of an aquaculture hub, but I never could really interest people in specifically focusing on sea cucumbers until 2018. We finally got the right ingredients of an investment group that was trying to do the same project out of Nicaragua, because Nicaragua at the time had never signed on to the worldwide ban prohibiting people to do anything with sea cucumbers. So the group that eventually came to Panama while they were in Nicaragua, they were just wild catching and freeze drying and exporting sea cucumbers and sending them to Asia. But even they knew back then that wasn't sustainable. And they were eventually going to run out of sea cucumbers. So before they even came to Panama in 2018, and they came here because of the political situation in Nicaragua, they were starting down a research path to try and reproduce sea cucumbers. Next slide. So that's when PanaSea was formed. The investment group actually came to Panama. We showed them what the facility that is now PanaSea, that had actually been a sea hatchery farming a fish called cobia by a company called Open Blue. And they had just vacated that hatchery because they needed so much more space. They actually bought land down the road. And you can look up openblue.com. It's huge. They produce a fish called cobia. And I know Jimena spoke about the Our Oceans conference. They were Open Blue and PanaSea. We were very visible at the Our Oceans conference. And then the LACWA, the Latin American Aquaculture conferences. So we formed the company PanaSea. There was one little glitch though. Whereas Nicaragua had never signed the ban, the worldwide treaty about protecting sea cucumbers, there were a few countries that hadn't signed it. Haiti, Cuba, Nicaragua, you can guess what players. Panama was a signer of the ban. So the first thing that the CEO did when he moved from Nicaragua to Panama, along with a group of local scientists and investors, you can see my husband here in this picture, myself, we formed a team and we petitioned the Panamanian government to allow us to operate as a research and development company, meaning we were going to figure out the science to how to restore the sea cucumber populations. And then when we had a surplus, the end game is commercialization with the goal of exporting outside of Panama. And that's actually where we are today. We're very proud to say, next slide, we have proven concept. I'm going to show you a little bit about how most of this happened during the pandemic. We took over the existing Open Blue hatchery, but cobia, as you know, is a finned bony fish. And we, of course, were raising an invertebrate. So there was a lot we had to do to tweak the hatchery going from vertebrates to invertebrates. Actually, our job is much easier because, as you know, invertebrates, it was a lot easier. The fish have to be vaccinated. They have to have a lot of additional feed. They have to have enhancers, stabilizers, all sorts of things that my little ugly invertebrates didn't need. So everything from about 2019, then we got caught in 2020. The good thing is, next slide. And the good thing is, when the pandemic hit, my husband, who is Panamanian, was able to petition the government that we are a research and development company with the intent of food science and producing food. So I really like the gal on the call who's involved in blue food innovation. I think you and I need to talk a lot after this program, because once we got declared a food production facility, we were mandated to stay open all during the pandemic. And that's really where we did all of our research gains. So this slide was 2020, April. We didn't know what we were doing. This has never been documented before. Nobody had published anything. Our consultant at the time, which is a man named Dr. Binny Hiraspi, he's actually in Australia, but I think in Brisbane. He has done this before, but in Asia, with totally different species who have totally different habitats, different feeding patterns, different spawning cycles. So we had to invent the science. So this is me collecting broodstock during the pandemic and collecting them in a place so our scientists could pick them up later and take them to the tanks that we had for spawn. So we didn't even know what species we were dealing with. We didn't know how they spawn. We knew from the research they spawned on the full moon. And in our case, we learned they spawn on the new moon. And because we're so close to the equator, that was a big advantage for us because they spawn actually twice a month. So yes, although sea cucumbers are everywhere on the globe, because we're in warm tropical waters, they spawn twice a month. So the ability to scale this project is just incredible. Okay, next slide. So you know male from female when they spawn, the way the males secrete their sperm and the females secrete their eggs. Once they spawn at midnight on the full moon, our scientists were then able to say, oh, that's a female, that's a male. And then they could separate them into tanks. Then we collected the sex cells and put them in fertilization tanks. And of course, our rate of death was quite high, but we still beat the rate in nature. In nature, as you know, the males produce 1 million sperm, the females excrete 1 million eggs, but very few actually get fertilized. So by doing the spawning and then scooping up the gonads and putting them, the gametes actually, and putting them in the fertilization tanks, right away, we were cutting nature's learning curve. So we, with that, then we ended up with healthy supplies of larvae. Next slide. In the hatchery. So then it was like, well, now what do? We have to put them in tanks. Do we aerate? How much nitrogen? How much oxygen? How do the larvae feed? So then all of our marine biologists ratcheted up into play. We have affiliations with the Maritime University, the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute. We actually have affiliations with the University of Panama. And it was a pandemic, right? So nobody could do anything. So they all came down to us. We have 12 dormitories on our property. So we told all the scientists, as long as you can get here during your 2-hour window, Panama had some strict lockdowns, come help us. We're not going to pay you, but we'll give you free room and board. And in exchange, you'll work for us and be part of our research. So that was a big plus as well. So you can see here, we're experimenting with depths of the tanks. Were the high ones better or the low ones? Were the blue ones better or the black ones? Was round better than square? Mesh tanks as we got bigger into the juvenile stage. So how much light? Because our hatchery basically was an old yacht club that has garages that were storing people's boats. But that serves us very well as our garages, as we could experiment with different things in different garages. Next slide. So then what we did was we let all the neighbors know. And again, this was during a pandemic. In the khaki shirt, you can see our hatchery manager at the time. His name is Daniel Velarde. He actually was the hatchery manager for Open Blue, helping them raise the cobia. So he knows a lot about scaling a seafood operation. He comes from Costa Rica with a background in shrimp farming. So he was very valuable to us. And he also studied under Dr. Benetti at the University of Miami. So what we did is we involved all the local neighbors to teach them what we were doing. If they saw us in the water, to not run over us, not mess with our cages or our nets, and educate the local politicians as well that we were going to be creating jobs and bringing notoriety to the area. Okay, next slide. So with that, we got even boaters. We're located in an area where there's a lot of recreational boaters. And Linton Bay Marina, where we have our grow out beds and our adult spawning pens, they are our biggest cheerleader. They have a full security detail. And all the people who live on boats were also stuck during the pandemic with not much to do. So one of our earliest collaborators is a video documentary maker. He said, well, I'm bored. I'll come do all your video documenting for free. So we were very fortunate that we had a lot of help and we had a lot of social media presence, a lot of content during the pandemic. Okay, next slide. So we started to become a real force in the community. This is my partner and I, and again, this is 2021. We started giving lessons to the local school children, teaching them how valuable sea cucumbers are, showing them what we were doing, giving tours of the hatchery. We also orchestrate beach cleanups in our area for the children. Also, I don't know if this happens in any of your areas, but surprising to us, a lot of the coastal children do not know how to swim. So we give swimming lessons and water safety instruction, and then coastal ecology lessons about good fishing practices and bad fishing practices. So all that came to serve us very well as we move forward, proving the science. Next slide. So we built relationships again with the local politicians, with the local fishermen. That became very important too, because although they do not eat sea cucumbers in Panama, so we were not really worried about poaching, they do tend to drag these nets on the ocean floor, looking for things like conch or octopus or bottom feeders, which isn't ideal for the sea cucumbers. So we were able to educate them as well. We had a lot of government ministers come down to see what we were doing. And still to this day, after pandemic lifted, then we have a steady stream of interns, university exchange programs, and we made affiliations with the Inter-American Development Bank, the World Food Program. So now we're very proud of all of those relationships that we built. Next slide. So again, more trial and error. As we learn the spawning science, then we learn the larval rearing science. Well, what do the larvae need before they grow their calcium carbonate spicules? Do they have tubular feet like a lot of other echinoderms? Do they want to attach to a floor? Yes, they do. So then we had to simulate in the hatchery, what would it look like, the seagrass beds, the algae. So along the way, we actually got algae specialists to come invent a special algae feed to feed our larvae and to feed the juveniles that we were keeping in captivity. This is me and with one of our experimental nets. That one happened to be square, but a rectangular. But then we also made some round ones to see if they liked those better. The algae would collect on the sides and they could attach to that. The problem with these nets, if you put the larvae in the water too early, that we learned, the microscopic copepods are the one predator of the sea cucumber larvae. So that wasn't ideal. At first, we had them on the ocean floor. So a lot of the larvae died. So then we decided to suspend them. So it's all about trial and error. And I'm very proud also to say that our scientists during all this time have published a lot of research. So a lot of this is open source now on the internet. Our species we focused on is called Holothuria mexicana. And so you can find now, thanks to our scientists, quite a lot of research. So we did increase the survivability of the juveniles. We had next slide, a lot of scientists helping us with weight studies and how many should we put in the tanks at one time? Do they show stress if they're too many, if the tanks are too full? So the answer to that, yes. Will they overeat if they're kept in captivity and we overfeed them? They won't actually overeat, but too much food is not a good thing in the tanks. So then we had to experiment with that. We decided, okay, good question. Carolyn asked about why did we decide on Holothuria mexicana? It happens to be a species that's native to our area anyway, and it survived the most. We have Holothuria floridiana and Barionatus in our area. Barionatus is actually a more valuable species than the Holothuria, but the Holothuria mexicana survives great. You can play soccer with that thing, put it back in the water, and it lives. So that we call our workhorse. And we know that the protein mass is attractive for what our market is looking for in Asia. We learned some other things about it along the way. So right now we are focused pretty much nonstop on that particular species. Now, yeah, since Jimena is showing from her computer, the questions do come up on mine, thank goodness. Oh, this is our algae lab. We wrote a grant, and I loved hearing Jimena say that she likes to write grants. Jimena, we're going to be great friends when you return back to Panama. So we wrote a grant and won some money from the Inter-American Development Bank to build our algae lab and to hire an algae professor an algae expert to create the secret sauce, which are microalgae, macroalgae with a mixture of diatoms thrown in there. Okay, next slide. Again, the larval rearing in the tanks became very successful. So we learned more about that. You see my partner holding a little larva in his hand. And so our survivability kept going up and up and up. And this would have been from 2020 to 2023. We just kept raising the survivability. The number of zygotes formed per spawn, the number of larvae, then raising the larvae into the juvenile stage. And now we can release them as juveniles, as long as they have some protection of calcium carbonate spicules into the grow out beds. I'll talk more about that in a second. So we learned basically how to keep those babies alive. We're like the NICU unit in the pediatric ward. Okay, next slide. So then by then, this is about 2020, late 2021. So COVID was being lifted then, and we got a lot more scientists. Some of these people are actually from other universities, University of Miami. We got somebody from University of Texas, A&M, their marine station. So it was just about numbers. It's a numbers game at this point. And then we pull in the cages, our scientists weigh them, test them, count them. We have a technology person that invented a scale model. So we no longer have to sit and count the larvae or with the Petri dishes, we can extrapolate. Okay, next slide. So then getting it right. Now you can see our hatchery manager. We kept some brood stock in the tanks in the hatchery so that we wouldn't have to go collect them every month for the spawn. And then we watched as the juveniles matured into young adults and then into adults. Of course, our goal is not to keep a large amount of adults in the hatchery. We like to return them to their native environment. And so we only kept a very small brood stock. Then what we would do is alternate. So we weren't repeating the same gene pool. So we would go to different grow out beds and collect different adults for different spawns. Okay, next slide. And then this was us returning some of the juveniles to their native environment. We learned, again, the predators, some of the crustaceans are not very nice. And if the juveniles don't have enough protection on their own, they are preyed on by fish and other marine animals in that food chain. So we needed to do a few more controlled studies to see how long we had to keep the juveniles in the hatchery. Okay, next slide. So then we started getting noticed by all of the national and international organizations. We got a lot of press, a lot of media coverage, and thanks to our social media as well. So again, we were front line and center at the Our Oceans Conference. This is one of our collaborators, Lucas Nida. He's actually Argentinian, but he came during the pandemic to work with us. My business partners started going to a lot of international conferences and giving talks on the success that we had achieved. And now we can take our show on the road. Next slide. So now we're establishing, we have an international internship program. The young man on my right is from Holland, and he came and dedicated 6 months to us. He wanted to use our hatchery and do his own studies on coral survivability with seagrass beds and with sea cucumbers. So he did his own controlled study in our hatchery, which helps us. We gain from his knowledge, and he gains from being able to use our facility, and then having the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute scientists collaborating with him as well. So it's basically a win-win in our area. Next slide. And again, this is me with my friend, you might recognize him, Dr. Daniel Benetti. We call him the Mick Jagger of aquaculture. He loves that title. So for those of you who are in aquaculture, he is just the god, the guru. And Panama has several aquaculture projects, one being Open Blue, one being PanaSea, one being Forever Oceans, and then a lot of stuff going on in Panama with shrimp farming. And everybody knows Dr. Benetti, so he's a great resource. Next slide. And of course, you know, our guru, Dr. Julianne Russo. She and I met at LACWA in 2023 in Panama and became fast and furious friends. And thank you, Julie. You're the reason I'm here today. And you're the reason Jimena is here today. So thank you for all you do in the pioneering of aquaculture and for women in the Caribbean. And next slide. Also, along the way, we affiliated with embassies. One thing we learned, and it's a message I'll give you going forward, if you're going to be in aquaculture research, especially women-driven, definitely knock on the door of all the NGOs you can think of, but also embassies or consulates that might be in your area, and then all the worldwide institutions, like I mentioned, World Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, United Nations, World Food Program, etc. But the embassies in your area can be a big help because they also have people from their countries who might want to come and lend a hand in what we're doing in the region. So that was great. That's the Dutch, that we did a beach cleanup for the Dutch embassy and got on their radar at our hatchery. Okay, next slide. Also along the way, for those of you who are in Women in Caribbean Aquaculture, as you know, aquaculture is a very uniting program. It's not just one species. Here I'm holding up our Mexicana, Holothuria mexicana, but in the background you can see we have seagrass beds, we have almendra, we have coastal plants, we have all sorts of an ecosystem that also needs taking care of. Next slide. And then along the way, we tied up with my university. I went back to my school of agriculture, which aquaculture falls under that. And I basically knocked on the door of the dean and I said, hey, can we have a memo of understanding? So he said, yeah, sure, that looks good to me. And so now we get interns from my university who come down and help us. My university is going to be doing all of our food testing, proteins, carbohydrates, fats, collagen, chondroitin. They're actually doing all the science of the chemical breakdown when we get to the point where we get our commercialization permits to be able to scale the project. That's actually where we are now. And I'm going to end with that. So we have proven the science as of 2023. We then in Panama, we had a change of government in 2024. So we had to roll back all of our commercialization application permitting process. So now we're in the process again of filling out all of our environmental impact studies again and applying to commercialize, scale with the intent to monetize, grow these in captivity, and export. So what that would look like is then we're going to be basically like a shrimp farmer. Although our animal, if you know a lot more about it, we don't need all those enhancers and we don't need a lot of stabilizers or additives to the animal. our food conversion, FCR ratio is actually the biggest advantage to the sea cucumber, because we do no additional feed other than the magic algae paste and everything that we've invented. So we think that we're going to be very successful in getting this operation running up and quickly to scale it, and then to teach other people in the region how to do the same thing with whatever species you have in your area. Next slide. So Jimena and I would like to thank you. I think that takes us up to where we're going to be available for Q&A. And our information is going to be on our final slide with our emails. And feel free to reach out to either one of us. You can also find us on LinkedIn, so you can feel free to reach out that way. And then, yeah, Jimena and I will open up the last 8 minutes for Q&A.
Thank you both. Jimena, if you could stop sharing the screen and write down the emails in the chat so we can see more faces and less letters at this point. I have questions for you both. I guess just to go in order, and this is just, if anybody has another question, just raise your hand or write it in the chat. But I'm gonna start, I think, with Jimena, and then we'll work with Rosalind. Okay, so you've worked in your thesis with the past of the ocean, paleobiology, but what are your hopes for the ocean in the span of your career? How do you imagine it to be? What do you hope for in your field? What do you see?
Well, my feel like at the moment, I feel like it's more science communication, and I really want to share with the world the science that has been going on and that I know of with the world. And I do hope that I can help create awareness to protect our ocean, because at the end of the day, it's a place for recreation, for science, for life, for a lot of things that I think are very valuable for us humans. So I just wanted to be a safe space for us, for the species there, and to protect it. Yeah.
Thanks, Jimena. And I bet this isn't the last time that you write lots of grant proposals, because
Yeah.
yes, that is actually a very valuable skill, and something that many people do in the R&D, if they're somewhere near R&D, because it takes a lot of money and a lot of risk and grit to really get where you're going.
Yeah.
Or having other people trusting in your project. So yeah, that's a muscle that I'm betting that you be very strong on.
Thank you.
And now I have a two-part question for you, Rosalind. As you were,
Okay.
I don't, from my perspective, I don't think that people actually realize how groundbreaking closing the cycle for a new species in aquaculture is. And not only from the scientific side, not only the R&D, the operation, but also associating with other trailblazers, trusting in the project, finding different sources of funding, engaging with the community in your case. And this in particular has become a complex project. I mean, it touches on policy, on others, relationship with other stakeholders, all the other relationships and sides of the picture that you talked about. So my question one is, did you expect this project to be so comprehensive from the beginning? And the second question is, which part of the puzzle has been the most challenging for you? So first one, did you expect this project to be this big?
Well, we knew we were groundbreaking, and we knew that we had to prove the science. The easy part is the end product and the commercialization part from a monetary standpoint. So our investors were on board from the beginning, because my business partner was already wild catching sea cucumbers in Nicaragua and selling them to Chinese buyers, that part was easy. So there was a motivation on behalf of the investor group to push the science so that we could do this in a sustainable way. But to answer your first question, yes, we knew going into it, we would have to do the entire roadmap. So from proving the science from spawn to adult, raising the survivability, and then once we invented the secret science, how do you scale that? So I unfortunately didn't add a slide about the very end before. Once we knew we had a scalable product, our last invention were these stereolite boxes where we had the right mixture of air, nitrogen, the gaseous mixture in the tanks. We had the right mixtures of feed going through, and we have 16 garages. We could fit 1,000 stereolite boxes per garage because we then knew the amount of light they needed, the amount of feed they needed. So the scalability has been proven. What is the challenge now is government regulation. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And I'm very curious to see if all of you other women who also are in Caribbean aquaculture, this for me is the beginning. I want to monetize sea urchins, which I have in my backyard. I want to monetize conch. There's so much more we can do with raising invertebrate animals for food. I personally am not interested in fin fish or bony fish. That's just me, because they require so much additional feed and vaccines and antibiotics. And there's a lot more that could go south. So for me, I'm kind of into the lower hanging fruit there. But government regulation, man, it's a tough one. And the fact that, for example, in Panama, we're in a country where every 5 years the government changes, and the new government that comes in punishes the old government that went out. So automatically they pulled the rug out from under us and shook it and said, yeah, whatever you did before really doesn't count, because now we're a new government. You got to start all over again. So who was it on this group? Maya, I think you're in the Bahamas. I'm super interested in that because my business partner is so frustrated with Panama. He's talking about relocating the operation to the Bahamas, which to me, I think it's just going to be the same bureaucracy.
Yep. Yeah, permitting is the biggest issue we have with even just the research, and much more it would be for commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and in Asia, of course, there are sea cucumber hatcheries that are reproducing sea cucumbers. And that's probably your next biggest question. If this is such a prized animal in Asia, why aren't they doing it in Asia? Yes, they are. However, because after World War II, most Asian countries put all of their economic eggs in the heavy industry basket. In other words, they wanted to go into manufacturing. So China, Korea, Japan, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, they all got into manufacturing, textiles, heavy equipment, machinery, agro, and they located their factories near coastal areas. And then to do that, you end up dumping residual, even if you're just dumping the water back for the cooling towers, they do have heavy metals in them. And those heavy metals leach into the ocean floor. So I'm only telling you this to say that, yes, sea cucumbers are native to those areas. But if you're going to try and use our plan, which is super cheap because we don't want to keep them in ponds as adults, we want to release them on the ocean floor. If you're doing that in Asia and you're releasing them on the ocean floor as juveniles, they have a soft ventral side. They gradually leach in the heavy metals through their soft body wall, and then their protein mass becomes unusable for human consumption. So we have a big advantage in Panama. We've never had heavy industry, and the ability to just release them at shallow depths right near the where our biologists can see them is huge as far as cutting your investment, cutting your cost. So there's a whole lot that goes into play. And Panamanian politicians have no idea what this potential holds. So we're having to educate them as well. And it's frustrating.
Thanks, Rosalind. We have a question from Carol here, and it's seems that you've been at this for over 5 years and are still working on commercialization. How are you funding the operation? Do you have venture capital, bootstrap?
Yes, we have a whole team of the finance side. I personally am not on the finance team. The way I got brought into this initially, I had been a friendly collaborator with Open Blue, who's the group that I said was doing cobia. My husband actually owns the real estate where that hatchery was. So I watched them for 10 years scale their cobia project. So, but I asked them back in 2004 if they were interested in doing sea cucumbers, and they were not. But along the way, they knew I was. So that's how the investor group came to find me in 2018. And they said, oh, you want to do sea cucumbers? You got to talk to Ros Baitel. She's been trying to get anybody interested in sea cucumbers. So they came with their own investment capital. My role was the local door opener. I'm a Spanish speaker. I knew the people in the community. My husband owned the facility. So we formed this team. I'm not on the finance side, but the answer to your question is yes. It's not a very expensive animal to raise, but there was capital investment, and they're still willing to see us through to the commercialization process.
Thanks, Rosalind, and thanks, Jimena. Thank you for sharing the spotlight with young talent over here, and other women working in oceans. And we're out of time. The time just flew by. So I'll just open the mic to for you in case you want to say something else for you guys, Rosalind and Jimena.
Thank you for joining, and come visit.
Yes. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen. I don't have a second monitor, so you'll see Canva over here. Okay, so thank you for joining us. Thank you, Rosalind, thank you, Jimena, for being here and for preparing this presentation for us. As you can see, this is one of the last sessions that we have on this summit. And so we're very happy that you were able to be here, that you were able to answer our questions and share your journey with us. So tomorrow you are invited for the last session of the summit.
Yes, I just talked to Donnie, who is the tilapia farmer in Jamaica, and he has just prepared all his seasonings, because in Jamaica we love our seasonings, some scallion and some onions and things to prepare the tilapia. So please join us to come and watch some, and it's going to be at 10 a.m. Jamaican time. Let's use Jamaican time, because now I'm like, we've been like on and off the EST all week. So I am in Jamaica, so now we're going to use 10 a.m. Jamaica time tomorrow.
But 10 a.m. Jamaica and EST is two different ones.
It's
Yes,
two different
I'm very
things.
sorry because this slide was supposed to be updated to New York time. But as you can see at the beginning, I didn't present the correct presentation. So I'm sorry about that. But do what Julie said, and
I'm going to advertise it 10 a.m. Jamaican
Yes.
time tomorrow. Yeah.
It's been a very confusing couple of weeks since the daylight savings. So
Yes, for everyone.
bear with us.
But it's been good. It's been good. We have managed.
Yes. So thanks to our sponsors for making this happen. Biomar, Number 9 Marketing, the brilliant Hazel behind it, and the brilliant Grace behind Digital with Grace, Moss Solutions, a Caribbean business, and the Latin American and Caribbean chapter of the World Aquaculture Society, Aquasafra Tilapia, and Nexus Distribution. Thank you. And thanks to you for being here and for engaging with us. Thank you so much, and see you in the next one.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.